Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm really excited for this call, which I was going to put on my Vitality Secret page, but I decided to put it on the main profile because it's further to a post I put on my main profile about 2 weeks ago on ADHD and my belief that kids are being over-medicated. So I really wanted to put this out there to give you some really great value. And I've brought to you someone who I consider to be a pioneer in this field, Andrea Frank Henkhart, who is the author of 9 books in health and wellness. And she has a very specific kind of personal interest in ADHD. She has shared the stage with the likes of Jack Canfield and Dr. John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, Tony Robbins. She's had one of her books endorsed by Oprah Winfrey. So she knows her stuff. She's really great. I've just come off the phone with her just talking for a long time, and we could have talked for hours on this stuff. So without further ado, Andrea, thank you so much for affording us your time to really share some valuable information. I know this is going to be good. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Neil. I'm really happy to be here. It's such an important topic to talk about.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I mean, before we start, I'd love to just ask you what your background is and what kind of triggered your interest and your inspiration in really kind of learning about this.
It was an interesting process, actually, because I was a midwife's assistant back in the 80s, and watching babies be born and watching the innocence and purity of babies, and then watching what happens to them after with all the injections and stretching and things that are happening to children and setting them up for their future. And being an author, I started writing more. I wrote 3 books on natural childbirth, and then I wrote about communication skills for parents and kids. That's the one that's endorsed by Oprah and Deepak Chopra, that I co-wrote with my daughter when she was 15, talking about how parents can communicate. And I've been a nutritionist for over 35 years. And so for me, looking at how not just communication skills matter in how we raise our children, but nutrition matters so much, and how we can put all those different factors together to create healthy, happy children and create health and harmony at home. When my own son was diagnosed with a learning challenge in middle school, it really shocked me because we lived this very clean lifestyle and we had good communication skills, but something was off and I didn't know what it was. And so when he was diagnosed, they wanted to put him on all kinds of medication that, when I did the research, saw what the side effects were, knowing that Ritalin, for example, is just a couple of molecules different from Meth Amphetamine. That wasn't what I wanted to put into my young child's body. And it was really scary, and not knowing what to do. And it was quite serious at the time. So I started looking into this more and more about what our options were and what we could do.
Wow. Yeah. I can imagine that really kind of inspired you to look into it. It's interesting what you just said about Ritalin, because I called it street legal meth, and a few people kind of kicked up at that. But you're so right. It's 1 or 2 molecules off, isn't it? It's really quite incredible. I've taken like those ADHD drugs, and my hands were like this. I was all jittery, and I'm a fully grown adult. So yeah, what did you do? What did you find out about ADHD? You went on a bit of a quest, didn't you? And,
I did.
Yeah. So what did you find out? What was this condition that your son had been diagnosed with?
Well, it's interesting because back in the 50s, there was a Dr. Feingold, and Dr. Feingold had first started. He came up with this diagnosis of hyperactivity. That's when the word hyperactivity kind of came into being, and he linked it to sugar and food dye, particularly red food dye. And it was published, his information was published. And at that time, back in the 50s, a long time ago, really, the medical community literally laughed him out of the medical community and banned him from practicing medicine. So he did with Dr. Feingold is he went back and studied and proved that his theories were correct. And the medical establishment, the AMA, literally apologized to him and welcomed him back in. And so Feingold was the pioneer, and that was just called hyperactivity. That was kids having too much energy from too much sugar and chemicals in their food.
Wow.
And this was again back in the 50s, before we had all the technology and chemicals that we do now. which are, they release 80,000 toxic chemicals all the time, every year, and they don't even tell us what's being released or how it's affecting us. These chemicals are all around us now. It was less back then. So that kind of, that led into this whole thing of ADD and ADHD. And, if we study the history of where that came from and how it developed, we're just looking at kids who have a lot of energy. And then when you add in technology and what that does to the brain and the eyes and the body and all the electromagnetic fields from cell phones and iPhones and all, computers and iPads and things like that, we're constantly exposed to that. So all these things are disrupting. They're disrupting brain chemistry. And that's where the downfall happens, with the disrupting of brain chemistry, the lack of proper nutrition that feeds the brain to keep it really, really healthy. And then, different styles of parenting and different styles of schooling that aren't necessarily right for that child. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's not fitting the needs of that particular child. And so all of those things altered together can make a huge difference for a child. Sometimes it's just one or two of those things can change things like that.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So, yeah, what you just said is that there's a lot of toxins now in our food supply, in the environment, and there's way more today than there ever was back in the 50s. I think we only need to just walk down the cereal aisle and we just start looking at the ingredients of some of these things. And if I like to think, if you can't pronounce an ingredient, that shouldn't go inside your body. And there's things that really shouldn't be allowed to be in foods. But that's just food. Then there's all the environmental stuff, and we're kind of living in a world where we need to make bottom line profits, or large organizations need to make bottom line profits, and they need to extend the shelf life, and farmers need to yield more in less time, and there's all these different pressures on all these big organizations, and it's almost like they don't have to use these chemicals, but they're choosing to use these chemicals, and then we end up kind of suffering. I remember, back when I was at school, ADHD wasn't a thing. It wasn't an available condition to have. And I know it's treated very differently in Europe as well. You said something earlier which really startled me. You said in America that schools receive a kickback for the prescription of drugs for ADHD. Is that correct?
They do. When children are diagnosed with ADHD and they're put on drugs, the schools get a kickback for that. And it's shocking. And they've been doing that for a really long time. So teachers are the ones that say, hey, your kid's got ADHD or your kid's got ADD. And it's teachers who are diagnosing these children. Well, number one, how are they trained? What's their medical background? What do they know about the way that child's brain works? How are they looking at their own relationship with the child? Whether, it might not be their favorite kid in the class. It could be that just that teacher may be the best teacher there is, but not the right model for that particular child. So there's a conflict. Well, wherever there's a conflict and the kids are falling asleep, overacting, overreacting to things, being the class clown, not being able to sit still, whatever it is, then the teacher says, ADHD, go get checked. And then the parents, now there's, many, many years ago, we didn't have all these places where families could go and get diagnosed. Now they're on every block. You can get your kid diagnosed anywhere. And what do? Immediately, they put them on medication. Usually they give them a cocktail of a few different medications, which is going to alter their complete brain chemistry, their gut, everything in their body. And then we talked about earlier, these kids get diagnosed and they get labeled. Well, anytime we're labeled, we step into those labels, even if we don't like them. And especially a child who doesn't understand it, they're going to be treated differently by the kids, by the teachers, by the parents, by their siblings. That kid's special, that kid's got a problem. Now they're going to respond to that behavior. And it's just a springboard for so many things that can happen. Yeah,
I think it's a big thing. Calling something a disease is like, it's putting us into a disempowered state. It's like, you have this thing, therefore you need to go, therefore we're going to take this drug. And it's one of the most disempowered states we can be in, I think. It can kind of almost put us into a victim state. And then we almost fall prey to whatever comes to us. But I like the idea of thinking of these things as a symptom of something. It's like a communication from the body saying, okay, something's out of whack, something's out of balance here. What can we do to bring the body back into a state of balance so these symptoms disappear? We've got so many labels these days, haven't we? ADD, ADHD, whatever it is. You know, I know there's different ends of the spectrum. It could just be concentration problems, but on the other end, it could be someone or a kid needing to be on a leash, like the example you gave me earlier, when they literally won't sit down. Maybe that's even a good segue to bring up that example, actually, because that was incredible. I had no idea. A friend of mine last week actually gave me an example of someone wanting to kind of run in front of vehicles on a road or something. I'd never heard of it being that extreme, but it sounds almost similar to the example you gave me earlier of that kid who was, I think you said was 12 years old, who'd been on a leash. Mm-hmm. Could you quickly talk about that story? Because that blew my mind.
He was on a leash from the time he had his 18-month vaccinations, when he stopped all verbal ability, and everything shifted for him, because it wasn't like that the first 18 months. So his parents had to put, I'm not a proponent of putting children on leashes, but this child needed to be for his own safety, because he flails, like really his whole body flails. He's not safe to even walk himself. So he's monitored like that 24/7. And, you know, we did an experiment up in Mendocino, California, and we watched with his medical doctor and a team of nurses. They were monitoring the kid's blood, and we were with a group of children. And this little boy, after a couple of days of having the right therapy that he needed and the right nutrition that fed his brain, he was able to be off leash for the first time in 10 years. And I explained to you, he was sitting in a cross-legged position on the floor, playing with a little toy, and he didn't take his vision away from the toy, and he didn't stop moving, but he was sitting cross-legged. We timed it. He was sitting for 20 minutes.
Wow.
He's still nonverbal. I mean, it wasn't like they found a cure, but the difference, can you imagine?
Yeah, you said, and you said the father was crying, just like crying in absolute joy.
Oh, I just got goosebumps. The father was, to have his child off leash for the first time in 10 years is just, it was amazing for him to see that. Yeah,
I bet. Yeah, that's incredible. You touched on something which I'm sure we could talk about for hours and hours and hours, the fact that it was triggered by the vaccine. I think it's worth knowing what can trigger these things. But I guess what's more important, if someone's already suffering and, or they have children who's already suffering, what can be done? I mean, the way I see it is we need to thoroughly detoxify the body in every way, shape and form. And heal, you touched on the gut earlier, because we now know there's a solid gut-brain link. So when we change the microbiome, because there's all these neurotransmitters now in the gut, we know there's a brain there as well as the heart. But let's not talk about that now. What can be done to repair the gut when someone is suffering from ADHD, concentration problems, depression as well? We now know there's a huge link between the gut and depression. What would be some of your great tips there? Because I know you have some.
Definitely. There's so many factors we've already touched on. There's the environmental factors. I mean, we could just look at that. Now, I want to just preface this by saying none of these things are necessarily going to cure anything, but we have to start unraveling. We have to start unraveling the problem that exists. And it's not just one thing. It's not one medication or one diet change or start using cotton sheets. I mean, it's not one thing. It's a conglomeration of a lifestyle change. But when we're looking at the lifestyle of any human being at any age, is it worth it? Absolutely. Especially when we can do these things that don't cost a lot of money, and it doesn't involve necessarily medication. If a child still needs some medication, that might be something that you have to discuss with your doctor, and I'm not going to get involved in that. But I know just simple things. For example, when we're messing with a brain that's already fragile. So you've got a child that's born and it's a healthy baby, but we don't know what the mother and father's complete health was what they were eating and drinking during pregnancy. It always takes two to make a baby, obviously. And I always talk about that batter. You want that batter that the mom and dad are creating to be a healthy batter. And then you want the oven that the baby's cooking in to be even healthier and cleaner. So it's preparing the body for the mom and the dad before. And then you've got this vulnerable baby that's born. And now you're going to add chemicals of vaccinations, which is, again, a topic in and of itself. And then we're surrounding them with just even the toxic plastic diapers that are put on their body. To a sensitive child, that could set them up for a lifetime of skin problems, could set them up for a lifetime of just this one medical doctor told me just these smallest little things can set their brain off to create a malfunction. We've got, you mentioned, and I'm still with the subject here, but you did mention about walking down the cereal aisle. I'll go you one better, Neil. Walk down the cleaning aisle, the house cleaning stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You can smell that from aisles away. Now, children breathe in more air per body weight than adults do. Our dogs and cats breathe in even more because they're closer to the ground. So as these children are breathing in more air per body weight, just the toxicity that doesn't go away, it leaches out, it affects their brain and their body.
Wow.
It's really huge. Now, when they're ingesting things, we're talking about the gut biome. Well, everybody gives their kids, most people give their kids orange juice. And we think, well, we'll buy the organic one and we buy the one that's not concentrated or has pieces of orange in it. If you look at oranges, this is just an example, look at all the orange juice on the shelf, you're going to see they're all the exact same color. Doesn't matter, as long as they're not fresh squeezed, they're going to be all the same color. Doesn't matter who manufactures them. They use an orange packet in all of them that the FDA does not regulate and does not have to give you the ingredients of what that packet is that makes all the orange juice in your grocery store shelf orange.
Wow.
Could that packet be affecting the brain chemistry of your child? Absolutely.
Goodness.
So that's just orange juice, right? Now we're putting in all kinds of different foods. I don't care if it's organic. It can upset the system of the child. You've got a brain that's fragile, and we've got the environmental toxins that are leaching out into the environment. Dryer sheets. Everyone uses dryer sheets. Did you know there's formaldehyde in them? Did you know there's something called linalool in them that's a known carcinogen? There's a numerous amount of carcinogens in dryer sheets. So all these things can set off a child. And then we want to look at what's going into their body. So when we can balance brain chemistry naturally through giving the right supplements and the right nutrition, it can make a difference. Again, I'm not talking about a necessary cure. Necessary cure. I'm not necessarily talking about a cure, but I'm talking about making things better and helping our children and even helping ourselves as adults if this is an issue. So there are many different do. And what I did talk about in direct answer to your question, years ago, I was talking to my clients about getting rid of gluten, getting rid of dairy, getting rid of excessive sugar, getting rid of chemicals, getting rid of
before it was cool.
Before it was cool, before there was keto, paleo, macro, before all of that, because it just makes sense.
30 years ago.
I did it 35 years ago. It just makes sense. Wow. And we do see a difference. We really do. And it's simple. Yeah. It doesn't cost a lot.
I know. And those three things, the gluten, the dairy, and the sugar. I mean, in America, the gluten has been so tampered with by man now, hasn't it? It's gone through this process called mutagenesis. It's had all these different proteins added to it so the farmers can yield more in less time. And then they used to be like 1.5 meter crops. Now they're 1 foot tall. And then they're sprayed in all these pesticides and herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, and everything ending in sides. And then we're wondering why the gut's going out of balance. And then there's the gut-brain link. And it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy what kind of conditions can be reversed by taking out just one thing. And then the dairy, well, I think it's amazing, really nutritious if you're a baby cow. And then it's amazing how many people can clear up skin conditions, for example, by taking out gluten and dairy, let alone, the brain chemistry, how it affects the gut. And then there's the sugar, of course, and we're having way more sugar nowadays than we ever did back in the 80s, and then there was the low fat craze when all the big food companies came along and just took out all the fat, put a load of sugar in, and said go low carb, or sorry, low calorie. So yeah, all sorts of crazy stuff happened. I mean,
It's all mixed up.
there's lots of different things happening at the same time, isn't there? There's never just one thing. I just think if we were to kind of really look at what we're doing, and I wonder how we can simplify this, but it's, if we think anti-inflammatory, we need to think clean in every way, shape and form. It's not just clean food. And, you know, if you're in America, particularly taking out the gluten and the dairy, because it's all the hormones and antibiotics and all that stuff. It's cleaner. It must be said in Europe, it is cleaner. It's much better gluten there. It's better, I'm not going to say better dairy. It's still designed for baby cows to grow fast. Some people won't like me saying that. It's okay. So
I can share a whole story on dairy if you wanted to hear it.
we could probably talk for hours on that. But yeah, I think we can kind of, you know, have a little process and find out where the toxins might be coming from. If we just say the gut is most responsible for all of this because of the gut-brain chemistry link, would that be fair to say? Like, if you put a good focus in the gut, I mean, and then of course you've got the emotional side of things and the communication side of things and the stress and trauma and stuff. But would you be able to say, let's focus on the gut?
I think, to be fair, we need to focus on the gut and the brain.
Yeah.
They really do interact together, and it's very important, because if you can change your diet, for example, but if your brain's not getting the nutrition that it needs to feed it, your gut's not going to be in harmony. So it's important to have them both. And you mentioned something about, well, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I was just going to say, to get the right nutrition for the brain, that means that the gut needs feeding.
Yes.
Because if you've got leaky gut, for example, and even as a kid that can happen, and you know these drugs are causing problems in the gut, that's going to cause an upset in the brain chemistry. So we need to clean the gut in order to allow the brain to receive its nutrition, don't we?
Correct.
Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you can even look at something like diverticulitis, for example, and people who get diverticulitis, they stop eating strawberries and berries and anything with seeds in that can get stuck in their stomach, in their in the intestine. So you're taking one thing out, but that's not what caused it in the first place. You're talking about leaky gut. What caused it in the first place? Where's the imbalance coming from? And one other thing I wanted to mention is we're looking at, when babies are born, not only are they given all kinds of, injections and different things, and the foods that they're given, or the mother isn't eating well herself, and so her breast milk it's going to be better than not, but she's not giving the baby the best nutrition in that breast milk. But then we start giving them over-the-counter medicine. There's all these baby aspirins and baby cough syrup and baby this and baby that. You just Google search it. You don't have to be a rocket scientist or a certified nutritional counselor or an author like you. You just have to Google search this thing and look for what's in these things and the side effects. And I don't think any parent in their right mind, because every parent, I think, ideally loves their child, if they really knew the truth, Neil, they wouldn't be giving their children all these over-the-counter things. Oh, my baby has a fever, I've got to give him aspirin, or I've got to give him this medication. Fevers are it helps the body. It means your body's cooking. It means your body is heating up and working to kill whatever bacteria is there, allowing the body to do that. And actually, baby temperatures can go very high before it's dangerous. But parents freak out, and then they start giving them medication and not realizing that all those things have side effects that are long lasting. It's not just a day or two or a week or a month. And how does that affect the brain? How does that affect the gut that lasts long term?
Interesting. Yeah. I'm not a parent yet, so I can comment from being someone in the know about stuff. I can't comment from being a parent. It must be so difficult for parents, because there's so much to know, isn't there? There's so much.
Yes, but you know what? A lot
to
of
do the best for your kid, and
so much of it is about trust as well.
Yeah,
trusting the innate ability of our own bodies to heal. Now, granted, there are diseases, and we need the medical attention. We need hospitals and medication and things that save lives, absolutely. But I think we overuse and abuse it. And when parents, I know I raised 2 children, and so who are beautiful, healthy adults that travel the world internationally, living in third world countries, and my kids don't get sick. They rarely get the flu. They rarely catch a cold.
Yeah.
And their immune systems are strong because when they were babies, I was so aware of what was going in, on, and around their bodies that I created a healthy immune system for them that talk about the gut and the brain. It gave them a strong background in which to grow healthy and be healthy, sane, balanced adults who can travel without having to worry. So I think these things are so important. And so it's about trusting our bodies. My third book on natural childbirth was called Trust Your Body, Trust Your Baby. It's all about trusting. And there's so much information available now. When my kids were growing up, we didn't have internet. We didn't have computers. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have access to any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the research. I read the books.
Amazing. Good for you. That's just incredible what you're doing and how you're helping people now. You hit on a note, something so powerful then, trusting the body's ability to heal. And it's something that we've almost been conditioned out of knowing. It's like we've been conditioned to go to the doctor if there's something wrong with us, and we just accept their prescription. We just go, okay, I'll take that. I'll take that antibiotic. If I've got this symptom, I'm going to take this antibiotic because that's what that doctor's telling me. But when we understand that the body is actually always trying to heal, it's actually wanting to be in a state of balance all the time. And we were actually born healing. When we think of it like that, and how the drugs are just kind of masking symptoms. It's like putting a Band-Aid on your arm and just kind of expecting for it never to come back again. When we understand that the body will heal always, when we give it what it wants and we take away what's harming it. And I think with ADHD, it's just the same as, it's not just the same, it's a symptom, as are lots of other things, whether it's type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure or high cholesterol or gout or whatever it is. They're all symptoms. But when we go over to ADHD and go, all these are symptoms, and ADHD is also a symptom. So can we say, what is causing this symptom that we've now labeled a disease or ADHD? Can we figure out how to then allow the body to do what it is designed to do? And that's kind of what you're doing, isn't it? And it's what you've represented in all your books, and it's what you talk about on stage. And it's really, we're very kind of aligned in that we're trying to empower people to understand how powerful their bodies are in healing when we understand that that's all they want to do. So I've waffled then, but it's just that I wanted to touch on that because you mentioned the body's ability to heal, and I think it's so important to know because it's always trying to heal. And the thing that you mentioned about the temperature earlier is the body doing an incredible thing. it's doing what it's designed to do. I mean, again, I'm not a father, so I don't know what it's like to see your child warm up to whatever degrees. It must be really frightening. But understanding that it's a biological process is pretty powerful, isn't it?
It's amazing when you think that our bodies are breathing us right now. Whoever's watching this, your body, your eyes are blinking, your body's moving, your heart's beating, your blood, your 100 trillion cells are being kept alive by your body without you having to consciously think about it. Our bodies are miracles, and when we treat it like a miracle, and we give it what it needs, I keep saying the same thing over and over, as if it were a miracle, as it is, magic happens. And if you're looking at ADHD, we're not even talking about cancer and how that can be cured naturally. We're not talking about some of these other big diseases that can be cured naturally that the American Medical Association doesn't want us talking about. Can be very controversial, I suppose. But we're looking at ADHD, an imbalance in brain chemistry, or is it just behavioral issues? So let's look at, where's the kid going to school? Is the child getting that education, not because we like that school or it's down the street or it's where the parent went or it cost a lot of money or it's free? Is that the right environment for that particular child, which may not be the same as your other kids?
Yeah.
Is that child being parented the way that child needs. And what does that even mean? And that's what I've worked with parents for decades now. In my consultation, my private practice is helping parents see the different angles. I mean, my two children are as close as they could be. They're best friends, which is every parent's dream. But I raised them intentionally. I put in a lot of conscious thought into how I was going to raise my kids. And they're also different as night and day. So again, being able, and my son did have learning challenges. So being able to parent each child the way they need to be parented, not because I'm the parent. And it's not about lenient parenting, because that can be as detrimental as being too strict. So there's no manual for what we need to do here. So there's so many aspects and components of this, Neil. And as we begin to unravel it, we can see how this can all be dealt with, actually in a very calm, loving, understanding place, without having to get involved in all the different types of medication in most cases, and creating trauma and drama for families and the children in their school and in their friendships.
Yeah, I love that. We touched on another aspect earlier, which was all the iPads and electrical devices. It's like we're living in an age of hyper distraction, because we're constantly, if you're an adult with ADHD and you're checking your phone every 30 seconds or something, that's gonna affect your ability to focus. In fact, there's a book you mentioned earlier, John Gray's book. Was it How to Stay Focused in a Hyper World?
In a hyper world.
Yeah, I mean, we have to really be mindful about how we're choosing to focus, because when we're constantly being distracted and we're constantly looking at our phone, looking at social media, push notifications, all this stuff, it's like the brain is not an octopus. It's not designed to do all this at the same time. It's like it focuses. When we focus, that's when the magic happens and we can get into flow, and then that's when really cool stuff happens. But we're not allowing ourselves to do that a lot of the time. And it's also affecting children as well, because they're often on iPads, and then of course the light from the phone affects the mitochondria in the eyes.
Exactly.
My eyes are slightly bloodshot because I've got a fan blowing in my eyes, but it does actually affect the mitochondria in the eyes. So then we need to think about the blue light that we're getting in, and then the white light, isn't it, from the screen? But it's there's so many things to think about, aren't there, all the time, and it must be so overwhelming if you're a parent. Are there some do you have a protocol? I mean, you must have a protocol that you follow in order to kind of guide people through healing them, either their children or themselves, from ADHD or learning difficulties?
I do. I mean, I always start with nutrition first, because as a nutritionist, that's my main approach. And then as a family psychologist, coming in from that dynamic as well, and what the child's need is, and how to help them. So, I partner with a nutritional company that I found, that I think I've been working with them for 16 and a half years. I've personally coached over 10,000 people one-on-one, watching the differences of what happens for them, specifically with children. It's been astounding to me to continually see this change that can happen. So that's number one. And then, when children have a lot of other issues too, when there's skin issues involved, and, eczema and different things that we've talked about before, and behavioral issues. So all these things, there's just little things that we can do. The cell phone, iPad thing is very, very important. What people don't realize is that electromagnetic field that we're constantly exposed to, even if we have computers in our home. It's constantly going throughout our houses, and it is affecting our brains in a big way. And there's a lot of studies that have come out that are being hushed. We don't know, they're saying it's not true, but we're seeing an increase in brain tumors. We're seeing an increase in problems like that. We've looked at Alzheimer's and dementia and how that's increasing. Is that related to all the electromagnetic field, the EMFs that we're being overexposed to? You take babies, brand new babies, and people are sticking them in front of Einstein TVs and things like that, whatever, to learn, when sometimes they just need to be watching that little mobile thing running or going, twirling over their head, or they need a toy that they can focus on and have the tactile stimulation. So children with ADHD are losing oftentimes that they can't be touched, or they don't have the tactile stimulation, or they've got to touch too many things at once. When they've got OCD, but it's all this stuff that's coming in. And we haven't even taught children to learn to take care of their own selves. So when a child, what do they always say? I'm bored. So we put them in front of a TV. We put them in front of a screen. We give them a video game to watch that's stimulating, as you said, their eyes, the mitochondria of their brain and their eyes and their whole body. And we haven't taught children to self-soothe. So a child with ADHD does not know how to self-soothe because they don't know how to sit in peace with their own selves. So do we teach them meditation and all that? There's something to that, but that may not be in style with somebody's family. But there are these other things that we can reduce by reducing screen time without creating World War III in your family. By switching out some of the more negative foods for some positive foods. And it can be done in a way, again, without creating World War III in the family. And it can all be done without creating more stress on the parents. Because yes, parents today are just as stressed, if not more, than their children, of course, because they're dealing with all of this. So there's many different things that we could look at.
Yeah. Yeah. The screen thing's such a big thing. And it's something that a friend of mine who actually founded a company called 1 Year No Beer, and it's all about coming off alcohol. But he said to me, he didn't want to be he didn't want to be a, oh my God, what's the Apple thing called? The iPad.
iPad.
He didn't want to be an iPad dad. And I was like, what's that? He goes, when you just give your kid an iPad, be quiet, have the iPad. And I thought, wow, I didn't even know that was a thing. But it's interesting because if they're constantly on screens, then I know what I'm like if I'm constantly on a screen, and I'm an adult. And I find it more, I have to really make an effort to focus sometimes. So yeah, I think there's a whole kind of protocol, isn't there? We have to look at everything.
There really is. And if you start looking around, if you start noticing, and it's something that I do all the time in an airport, for example, the parents are always on their phones, and their children are either on a phone or they're vying for the parents' attention, and they're acting out. They're climbing up on the chairs. They're climbing on the airplane seats. They're acting out, looking for the attention. I was in an ice cream shop just the other day. I was walking by and I saw a family, and a mom and a dad, and a little girl was probably 3 or 4 years old. The parents were both on their phones. The dad was swearing verbally out loud. He wasn't too happy with whatever he was seeing. The mom was commenting to her Facebook thing, whatever she was doing. And this little girl had her ice cream cone at the table. Mom and dad on either side of the table, and the little girl next to mom. She was licking her ice cream, and her ice cream was melting. And she kept talking to her parents. And I witnessed this. I just stood there and watched. And she said, "Daddy, taste this. Mommy, taste this." And the daddy was just swearing to his iPhone. They never looked up at this little girl. Never. And this was a family outing in an ice cream parlor. So if you start noticing, you'll see parents are always, I've got my phone right here. I do business, so I've got my phone. But there's a time when we put this down and we work with our children. Again, if we're going back to ADHD, it's not necessarily a chemical imbalance in the brain or even a chemical imbalance in the gut. It very may well be. But there's also a whole other aspect of parenting and relationship and communication that can make all the difference in the world in dealing with a child, to either prevent it or to deal with it.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds very powerful. And I wish as a parent, if I was a parent, I'd be able to give more kind of feedback on that particular point. I've got nieces and nephews, and all I can do is comment on, well, I think they're pretty good actually at staying off the gadgets. But
it's hard in this day and age. It's hard because it's the way of our world. It really is. But you look at a child who's acting out. A child they don't care if the attention is negative or positive. They want the attention.
Yeah.
They want the attention. And for some children, they only get the negative attention. So they learn how to do the negative things to get that attention. Because at least someone's noticing them.
Yeah.
It's lonely.
Wow.
So, again, we're looking at all the different pieces that put it together.
Okay, that's very interesting. Andrea, we've been talking for about 40 minutes, and I think that's a really good time to kind of bring this to a close. You've shared some really valuable information, and I'd love to just conclude. Do you want to talk a little bit about your books, or how people can find you if if they have a child with ADHD, or if they themselves are struggling with ADHD? Is that something you'd like to talk about?
Absolutely. You can email me, and I'll address all the emails. You can email me at lifebydesignworks@gmail.com. Lifebydesignworks. And I'm just double checking and making sure that's what it's actually called.
we can put a link after.
Yes, lifebydesignworks@gmail. I have a couple of them, so that's the one. Lifebydesignworks@gmail.com, and I'm happy to answer questions. My team or I will get back, to whoever has any questions. And as far as my books go, same thing. I personally own all of them now, except for some of the nutritional ones that's still owned by a publishing company. But you can get them all through me, so you can contact me for more information. Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I just thought about one example I wanted to really talk about very quickly, just as I'm wrapping up. You talked about the kid in the bathwater.
Yeah.
Could you very quickly talk about that? Because it just goes to show what the body can have inside it.
Yes, it's a longer story. I'm going to try and make it really short. In a nutshell, it was a study that we did. We had children in, this little boy was severely autistic on the spectrum, in a bathtub of oxygenated water, sitting in there with his dad. The dad was actually the medical doctor in charge of all these children. They both had their swimming suits on. And when they got out after an hour of this oxygenated water that does help the brain, we noticed a bathtub ring just where the child was sitting. So long story short, after thinking it was maybe just his swimming trunks that leached color onto there, the medical doctor, pediatrician, actually did a swab, sent it off to some special lab. And when they got the report back, we had pages and pages and pages of what was in that swab. It wasn't on the father's side. It was only the small area where the little boy's back was. He was about 9 or 10 years old, I think. And what they found was numerous herbicides, pesticides, rodenticides, different types of toxins. And the one that I found the most interesting was, one of the things they found was toxins in potato seeds, specific toxins in a specific potato seed was listed on this long list. And in reading through it and having the doctor decipher it for me, I went back to the mom and I said, tell me about your relationship with potatoes. And she said, I love potatoes. It's my comfort food. I love French fries, baked potato, mashed potatoes. I love potatoes. I said, did you eat a lot of it when you were pregnant? She goes, oh my gosh, yes. I live for potatoes. It's my favorite food. Well, interestingly enough, this child had a very high ratio of the toxins in the potato seed that was listed on the toxicity form that was found in the bathtub ring behind his back. So the potatoes, whether she ate organic or inorganic, or not organic rather, we don't know. But, however, what we do know is that potato seeds are often, and many seeds, are soaked in different types of chemicals so that when they get to the grocery shelf, they don't turn brown or black or yellow or whatever color the vegetable's not supposed to turn, and they last longer, even if it's grown organically, because organically just means that the fertilizer doesn't have specific pesticides in it. So that's sort of a short story of a much deeper story, Neil, but it was fascinating to see how what the mom ate during pregnancy, and the father for that matter, and how that affected him in a bathtub ring when the kid was 9 years old.
That's incredible.
It's amazing.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And it's mind-blowing how much just seeped out of that child through his skin.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you for sharing that again.
I just want to be sure parents aren't overwhelmed, just to say. I just want to be sure, because we've given a lot of information and shared a lot of stuff, and people might get off this and just say, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Don't know if I should breathe, and create more fear in them. And I just want to say, just take a deep breath and trust. Trust yourself, trust your child, and as Neil, as you said, trust the body's innate ability to heal. And there's many things you can read, you can learn, you can contact, either of us. There's so many people out there who are doing amazing work to help you understand all this. But basically, just take a deep breath. And I think that if we all wake up from our collective coca coma and start doing some things that are better than some of the things we've been doing before, just doing that alone will start to make a difference, not only for our families and our children now, but for future generations to come.
I love that, Andrea. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I understand it's been quite overwhelming, and it may have been. So I think that's brilliant what you just said. Thank you for really simplifying things. It's yeah, very well said. Thank you again for sharing all this, and I really hope this has been valuable for everyone. Andrea has given her details. I will share these details below the video. And thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. This will be available on the Vitality Secret podcast very soon, and will be shared on various social channels. Thank you. Thank you again, Andrea.
Thank you, Neil, so much. Bye, everybody.